Thank you. Thank you for making the time today to be with us. I'm Deb Sabaris. I'm the CEO of the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare. As many of you will know, we're the peak body for Child and Family Services here in Victoria. I'd like to begin by acknowledging land. I'm on the Wurundjeri land of the Great Kulin Nation. I'd like to acknowledge elders past and present, Aboriginal people with us today, and that this is and will always be Aboriginal land. This session is co-hosted by the Centre and FaPMI, which is focused on families where a parent has a mental illness, and was organised by the Centre and FaPMI, the FaPMI working group, which has been going for, I think, at least a year now. This group first met in 2020 to support more collaborative approaches to the mental health concerns affecting children and families. While the Centre represents a sector which develops and delivers services focused on the safety and wellbeing of children and families, the FaPMI program has a focus on building the capacity of adult mental health services and supporting other sectors working with parents and children. There is a growing awareness about the need to design service responses which meaningfully address the needs of parents living with mental health concerns. Today's forum showcases great examples of collaboration in practice between adult mental health services and child and family services. And we all know there's some remarkable work going on across Victoria. The mental health and wellbeing of children and families is not the domain of one sector alone, but a shared responsibility across all sectors. The Centre and FaPMI look forward to being involved in the Victorian Mental Health Royal Commission reforms, it's a mouthful, to improve mental health services, access and availability for all members of the family. We need to continue developing ways to work together. We need to appreciate the skills and knowledge in both sectors and develop reciprocal workforce development opportunities that can support better outcomes for families and parents living with a mental illness and their children. The more we explore the issues together, the more likely we are going to be able to understand the experience of parents with a mental illness, listening to their experiences, learning from children's experiences, and developing appropriate service responses. The Centre welcomes the FaPMI program focus on whole of family approaches across all life stages to create conditions for mental health recovery and wellbeing for all. The Centre has been in discussions with the Department of Health to discuss how child and family services can assist with the implementation of the mental health reforms, given our substantial role in supporting child and family wellbeing and the mental health concerns of family members. Today is an opportunity to share a few examples of collaborative partnerships that have emerged at the practice level. As the mental health reforms roll out across Victoria and the Centre and FaPMI working group continue to expand and thrive, we look forward to hearing more examples about effective collaborative practice in the interests of children and families where mental health concerns are present. It's wonderful to have such a great turnout for this important event. I welcome you all and will now hand over to Hannah Jewell. Hannah is the statewide coordinator for the Victorian FaPMI program, and she's located at the Boubry Centre. So I'm going to hand back. Look at all these fantastic logos on the screen. Huge sense of collaboration. I hope that you have a really good session. And thank you to Mandy and Sarah for helping pull this together. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Deb, and for your acknowledgement. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, and I'm sitting on Bunurong land today, and I want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to welcome everyone, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to the session today. And I'm very excited to be chairing this forum, and I'm hoping that you all kind of get to experience some of the excitement of some of the great work that is actually happening in this area. But as part of kind of starting today, I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping in terms of how we will run the session today. So for everyone who is attending, we'd really appreciate it if you can put yourself on mute. And your mute button, if you're not sure, is on the far side at the bottom. There's a little speaker thing. So if we can kind of keep that crossed, that would be wonderful. We'd also appreciate just you having your Zoom name on the bottom, and you can see mine kind of at the bottom there. That would be great if people can do that. And there's some ellipses on the top that you can press to change that if you can possibly. We'll be keeping our cameras on, but for the rest of you, feel free to kind of use your video or not, depending on kind of what suits you best during this forum. One of the things we'd really love you to do in terms of participating in this forum is that we'll have presenters who'll be talking, and we'd really love you to use the chat box to add comments and questions as we go along, and to do that in a sort of live as we go. So please kind of see that that is actually on the bottom of your screen, and it should say chat, and there's a little kind of little box that has like a talking bubble in it. And we will be checking those. I will do my best to kind of try and keep up with those. If it gets too busy, you'll have to kind of forgive me. I have returned from some annual leave, so it's my first day back. So I'll put in a clause there for myself to not keep up, but I have a wonderful team also behind me who will kind of keep me in check if I've missed something. So we'll look forward to kind of really hearing your comments as we go along. If you have any tech issues, please kind of try, and I think one of the kind of great things about tech issues is often the best thing is to just maybe go out of the session and come back in to see whether that actually helps in resetting, and so that you can potentially hear or see things better. But you can also private message Sarah, and if Sarah wants to kind of just wave her hand. We've got friendly Sarah here to actually help us with any problems. So please send her a message if you are having any difficulties. I want you to also note that this session is being recorded, and part of that recording will be that it will be shared later on. Okay, so to kind of the exciting bit, what we're actually going to be doing today. So we've called this forum Unlocking Key Ingredients in Cross-Sectoral Partnerships, Perspectives from Child and Family Services and Adult Mental Health, Working with Parents and Children. And part of this forum has come from a working group that we've put together, and one of our aims is to do a demonstration of some of the great work that is actually happening in the sector and as cross-sector partnerships. This session will showcase 3 examples of work that is occurring in developing cross-sectoral collaborations to improve outcomes for children and families where a parent has a mental health issue or concern. First is a case study demonstrating how working relationships between programs supporting mothers and new babies and the adult mental health service involved can lead to good outcomes for a mother living with a serious mental illness. The second presentation describes the layered work, professional development that has been built to support out-of-home care teams and carers appreciate the issues and generate responses to children who have parents with a mental illness. And the third presentation is a show and tell of a children's book that's been created to provide a voice for children's experiences to support care, to support the carers to help support that conversation with the children. And finally, we'll wrap up this session with some summary comments and some ideas about what's next for this cross-sectoral working group, and hopefully we'll inspire many ideas as we go along, and an invitation, of course, for you to join us in this very exciting work. So I'm going to go on to kind of our first speaker. And as I kind of mentioned, this is a case study demonstrating collaborative practice work with mothers infants where parents experience mental illness. And so I think you're going to share slides. The family services practitioners will demonstrate how they partnered with public mental health services to support attachment and connection between a newborn baby and her mother experiencing schizophrenia. This case study will spotlight how collaboration between sectors can more effectively elevate the voice of the child. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Vanessa, who has chosen to work with parents and babies after 10 years of teaching violin and baby music classes while studying psychology. Gosh, you keep busy, Vanessa, and diverse. Vanessa was also inspired to work in the community sector after being a mentor for a child in foster care for 8 years with the Pajama Foundation. Vanessa has been a community bubs practitioner at Family Life for 3 years, working with parents of newborn babies. Vanessa has a keen interest in mental health and attachment in infants and adults, and much of Vanessa's work has involved supporting new parents who also have a mental illness. Julie Wessel has also 22 years of experience working with children and families in a variety of settings, including family services, out-of-home care, child protection, disability and mental health programs in both practitioner and leadership roles. Julie has previously worked in the Family Life Shine program as a practitioner of intake and waitlist worker and supervisor. Julie has completed the Let's Talk program at the Bouverie Centre in the past and collaborated on tools and resources to assist parents in discussing their mental illness diagnosis with their children. Julie commenced work back at Family Life in 2020 as an infant practitioner and moved into the practice lead position in July 2021. Julie provides clinical practice supervision to approximately 28 practitioners working with children, families, and in the community with the Family Life's Family and Communities program. So I'm going to hand that over to the presenters, and also to just let you know that we'll have a question and answer session at the end of this session. So don't forget to use the chat, and I look forward to kind of hearing this next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for our introductions, Hannah. Nice to be joining you. We are joining from Boonwurrung and Bunurong country, and we are presenting a case that I was the practitioner visiting the family and Julie was my practice supervisor.
I'm going to put my glasses on. Yes, we want to share the slides and some reflections about this case study, about the importance of collaboration between mental health services practitioners, family services practitioners, but also collaborating with the parents. And we'll have, as Hannah said, some time for questions at the end. So we'd like to introduce this family. We've got Mum, who is 25 years of age, Dad, who's 25 years of age also. Baby was newborn to approximately a year old in our intervention, and grandma, maternal grandma, who is 40 years of age. So Mum was referred to the IFS, so Integrated Family Services space, and into the Community Bubs program due to concerns around her mental health, which were impacting her ability to parent her new bub. Mum was no longer in a relationship with baby's father at this time and was living with her mother, grandma.
So when I first met the family, I learned a bit about the background and the context that they were currently in, and Mum disclosed that she had experienced family violence as a child and also from baby's dad. And there was a system in Mum's family where Mum was often blamed as incapable by a lot of her family members and a lot of her close relationships, and also this sense that she was inadequate. And so mum was carrying this feeling coming into parenting, and that was a extra challenge for her. Mum was diagnosed with schizophrenia when she was 16 years old, and when she became pregnant, she had a relapse. And then I was working with her as she was working towards recovery from pregnancy to after the birth. And then as a result of mum's mental illness, Child Protection was involved, and there was an interim accommodation order to grandma, and mum was living with grandma, so very constant contact with baby. But mum felt that this interim accommodation order was a court document that said that grandma was a better parent than her. So it was a very painful process for mum to learn parenting under this order. And that was a context that I looked at a lot with mum. So when I first met the family, mum was still experiencing symptoms of her mental illness. And when I observed mum and baby and grandma together, mum and baby were quite disconnected, and baby wouldn't turn towards mum, and mum wouldn't interact much with baby. And then mum was experiencing a lot of dissociation, which meant that she felt she couldn't be near baby for a lot of the day, and parenting was quite triggering for her. So she would have to take herself away to calm down. Then she was also experiencing the beliefs that grandma was a better parent than her because of the interim accommodation order. Also, she believed that baby preferred grandma, and that baby wanted grandma to parent her and not mum. And so I was helping mum understand that baby definitely would desire a connection with mum, and we can support that connection. Another difficulty mum was experiencing was she didn't feel like she had the skills to be a parent. So she didn't have the confidence in herself that she'd be able to complete parenting tasks. So she she felt that grandma should do them instead, so that baby wasn't missing out. And she said things like, baby doesn't like me and I don't feel like a mum, which was very understandable given the context of how she became a parent. But in this case, it's a beautiful example of how our work together was able to move her to a different space.
Okay, so we've just got an example of the professional network. So prior to the referral, there were already some services set up. Excuse me. So mum was linked to an enhanced maternal and child health nurse, obviously Child Protection, as Vanessa mentioned, Children's Court. After the birth of her baby, she was admitted to mother and baby unit, and she'd had some hospitalisations during her pregnancy. It's our practice to work in a collaborative way with our families and services to provide the best possible outcomes to children and families. If care teams are not already set up prior to our involvement, then we'll work with the parent and the family and services to set up the most appropriate members for the care team. Throughout Vanessa's involvement with mum, some additional services were put in place, and some of these made up the care team, in particular the addition of the psychologist in the general care team, and also consultations with Vanessa made a huge impact on the outcomes for this case. Vanessa will speak to those key ingredients of this collaboration with both the mental health services and partnering with mum in upcoming slides. Okay, so I'm just going to have a quick drink of water because I seem to have grabbed a little frog in my throat. Beautiful. So in preparing this presentation, we talked a lot about the barriers to collaboration. Excuse me. And some of these sort of perceived barriers, and some of the things that we've heard family services practitioners have had concerns about in the past is maybe having a lack of confidence in understanding mental illness and how it plays into their role as a family practitioner. A fear that they will have to manage all of the mental health and the associated risks alone, that they might not have anything to offer regarding the mental health symptoms and how they impact on parenting. And a concern that the mental health services might not prioritise family services efforts to communicate or collaborate with them around the family. And similarly, some mental health practitioners that we've spoken to have kind of said that that parenting is not their main focus. They don't necessarily understand how their clients' mental health might be impacting their parenting capacity or their relationships with their children or child, and confused as to what the role of a family practitioner is and how that would relate to their own role with the client. So throughout my time in the sector, I have observed some of those examples of the above, particularly around the fear of carrying the mental health and suicide risk and people thinking that it's not their area of expertise. And Vanessa, you've got an example of this as well. Did you want to share that with everyone?
Yeah, sure. So I was reflecting that family services practitioners often feel that if it's a mental health related issue impacting on parenting, then they default that to the mental health team. But in this case, I have an example where with me working together with mum, it helped her parenting come along in the way that she had hoped. So this example relates to mum's dissociation, and mum would become quite triggered when she was connecting with her baby, and I was supporting her to understand the value of the connection. And after becoming triggered, mum would let me know that she was experiencing dissociation and she didn't feel comfortable staying in the room anymore. So she would have to go out for 10 minutes outside, ground herself, and then she was able to come back in. And this was impacting the parenting because grandma was experiencing this when I wasn't around, and mum was going out to ground herself, and then when she was coming back in, she wasn't then engaging in parenting for the rest of the day. So grandma was confused what was happening, and I supported mum to speak up for what she needed around her mental health symptoms. So I helped her tell grandma, I need a 10-minute break from parenting right now. I'm going outside. And then once the 10 minutes was up, she would come and let grandma know that she could come back into parenting. So that made a really big change for mum taking responsibility of parenting and also her own recovery.
And how did you partner with mum's mental health team around this?
So this was when I reached out to the psychologist and we discussed dissociation because it was a symptom that was very present in my sessions and coming up every time I went and visited. And the psychologist reflected that they had not observed mum experiencing dissociation in their sessions. So that gave me a lot more information that mum was being triggered by something in the family home. And then I could bring that back to mum, and we reflected on how we could help her with her triggers, and also the psychologist reflected on how they could bring that into their sessions so they can help mum as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Vanessa. Through sharing this case and other positive experiences and collaboration, both internally and externally, we hope to challenge some of these barriers, either perceived or real, and the beliefs, and promote collaboration with parents who experience mental health challenges, which may impact their parenting, and all of the services and practitioners that are working directly with them on those challenges.
So the next aspect I was thinking of was collaborating with the mental health professionals and what made this effective in this case. And one key thing that came to mind was that mental health services can be an individualized service, and mum was their client. So understanding why they would collaborate with me, who has baby in mind, I worked out that the intention for collaboration was to help mum participate in her life fully as she wants to. And so one aspect of her identity was being a parent. And so then we were able to collaborate together because we both had mum's parenting and her identity in mind. And then when I was collaborating with the mental health professionals, I reflected that some of the key components to this was a real openness and curiosity about each other's roles and expertise, and then a sense that we are learning together so that we could look at things from other people's perspectives, and that you needed a sense of trust and respect from that, and persistently coming back together. So regular meetings was really helpful. Then when I was collaborating with mum, I also collaborated with her about her mental health and how it impacted on parenting. And I think one of the main things that was really helpful for mum was for me to reflect my experience of connecting to mum and then help her reflect on how baby might experience connecting to mum based on what I was feeling. And that was kind of understanding how her dissociation can impact on a connection, and then decide how to manage her dissociation really well with her 10 minutes of grounding outside so that she could come back and connect with either me or baby. And I think a key component of collaborating with mum was first collaborating with the mental health professionals to make sure that they were assessing her mental health and her recovery and understanding her medication. So I didn't have to do that. I knew that she was well enough to engage in this way with me, and we could just support her parenting in this way. That was really important. And having the responsibility of grandma understanding what mum needs, and then mum letting grandma know. So here is just a few pictures of the concrete ideas we had together.
Thanks, Vanessa. So outcomes for collaboration with mum and the baby. So the changes, as Vanessa touched on, the changes in mum's experience of mental illness, she felt confident in her ability to seek support and work towards her mental health recovery goals because all of her care team were partnering with her as the captain of the team. Mum has learnt to assert her needs and optimise her recovery, so she's able to voice that she needs to ground herself or use some of her other strategies. She's understanding of how her environment and relationships can trigger her mental health symptoms. She understood her triggers and the context for her dissociation, and she understood how her relationship with her mum was affecting her parenting regarding dissociation, and how her experience of being parented herself affects her mental health and her own parenting. So Vanessa saw a lot of changes in mum's parenting. She's now been able to be present and develop a really strong connection with her daughter. Her and the baby delight in each other, look at each other, smile. Mum is able to soothe the baby, and baby actually now turns to mum for comfort. And she has more confidence in herself to always be there for her daughter. She's confident in her values as a parent, and she's working towards shared care. She now feels like a mum, which is amazing, and grandma respects mum's parenting role as well. This is me. So the outcome of collaboration with mental health practitioners. So Vanessa was able to gain information around the client's dissociation with consent, as she mentioned earlier. This allowed her to be open and transparent with mum about her mental health, how she was experiencing the mental health, how mum was experiencing it, and how that might be affecting baby, and using all of that information to then inform her interventions with the family. And as you saw on the last slide, there were a few different tools that Vanessa used with mum. Collaboration and updates on mum's mental health status informed the parenting goals. So as we said, because mum was able to understand mum's capacity, mental health services were able to understand how mum's childhood trauma was impacting her mental health from Vanessa's observations in the home and experiencing mum from week to week. Mental health services became aware of mum's experience of social anxiety symptoms from observations from engagement in parenting supports, and that helped them to put in some more interventions to help mum in that area. They informed Vanessa around mum's learning styles and cognitive capacity for learning parenting from her neuropsych assessments, which made it really great for Vanessa to really pinpoint how best to present the information and how mum might retain that information moving forward. And collaboration resulted in mum experiencing a really connected team who's holding her wellbeing and identity in mind along with her mental illness. So, key ingredient summary. So I think, you know, one of the main things that in doing this together is that being curious and open to new ideas and different approaches for all of the practitioners in all of the different sectors is really important. And finding ways to overcome any actual or perceived barriers to collaborating together, partnering with the parent as the captain of the team and seeking, and seeking their view and consent about who is the most appropriate people to collaborate with. Vanessa was able to, Vanessa was able to address any fears or questions that she might have had around mum's mental health by asking for clarification with her psychologist and other professionals, and looking at the best possible way she could engage with mum meaningfully and assess her capacity to receive and retain information in relation to her mental health status at that time, which we spoke about earlier. So I think, you know, another key ingredient is be willing to be vulnerable and say that you don't know or understand something. That's okay. We're not experts in everything. Be able to keep the parent in front of mind, as I said, that you're collaborating and seeking clarity to improve outcomes for the parent and child. So we wanted to share this case study both internally and externally, as we spoke about earlier, to promote this open and collaborative practice. It's our belief that partnering with parents around their mental health and wellbeing and collaboration with their mental health professionals promotes engagement with the service, builds really strong, authentic relationships between the family and the practitioners across all of the sectors, and assists the families to reach their goals and increase their parenting capacity in a really connected and empowering way. So we're open for questions now, but I also have some questions for you. I'm wanting to kind of put out there, why do you think collaboration worked so well in this case? And just a curious thing, would Vanessa have had the same sorts of outcomes with mum if she had not partnered with her or her mental health professionals? That's something you can take away and think about in relation to your own practice, or you could answer some of those in the chat if you wished. Thanks so much for your time, and we look forward to hopefully answering your questions.
Thank you. Are we turning to Hannah?
Great. Thank you both for generously sharing that, and what wonderful example, and thank you for all your thought too in putting that together. And I think there's been a number of kind of like comments, and I'll just kind of go through because I think there's a comment from George around holding the baby and child in mind with practitioners that focus on adults is so important. And she loves how you spoke about this, Vanessa. Shri also said the affirmation holding the baby child in mind with the practitioners that focus on adults is so important. Love how you spoke. A question for Julie and Vanessa. One, how did you navigate consent to share information?
Sure. So with every family we engage in, we ask them what services they're currently working with, and then we ask them if they would feel comfortable for us to speak with them in relation to this mum. We discussed how mental health was a major part of her life, and it was the reason that she had some challenges with her parenting. So we kind of described why it might be helpful for me to speak to her mental health team to know if she is doing well, and then also to understand how I can help her, also to understand how they might better help her with her parenting. So most of the time we take out our consent form, we get the services names, and our parents are usually very willing for us to collaborate because it will help them best.
It's also a live document, so while we get it signed initially, we make it clear that parents know that they can either add more services on for consent, or they can remove some if they wish to as well. And so it's a live document that can kind of evolve over time.
Great, wonderful, thank you both. From Caroline, in my experience, there can appear to be a culture of not collaborating amongst private mental health therapists who can seem to work in isolation, even when there is consent from the client. This may be due to the fee-for-service model and therefore lack of capacity time from private therapists to collaborate. This comment may be off track, but I think that's very true, kind of like, and in this case, were there private practitioners, or it was a public mental health system that you were dealing with?
Yeah, in this case, it was the public mental health system. I have previously worked with private practitioners as well. I think every private practitioner likely has a different fee schedule. So if they're going to charge for collaboration or phone calls with me, I've not worked with someone who has that fee schedule, but other private practitioners have been willing to work with me. I think the intention of the adult as the well-being and participation in life, and part of that involves parenting, that's a really clear intention of why I'd want to collaborate.
Yeah, great. I'm just thinking in terms of time, we've got a few kind of messages there. I'll just go down to see if there's a question. Valerie said, could you provide some reflection on timeframes for the service intervention, including collaborative work undertaken with the parents and the infants? Great question around how much time invested in it and how long it might take.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And I guess we probably should have explained it, because we have a few different programs and they have different timeframes. The Community Bubs program has a little bit longer timeframe than Integrated Family Services, which is usually 3 to 6 months. How would you kind of sum up your timelines in terms of collaboration and how much time that took for you, Vanessa?
Sure. I think at the beginning, there was a lot more collaboration as I was understanding mum's mental health status and how she was going and her mental health history. And then a few months in, that's when I was reaching out to the new psychologist, but I wasn't as close in contact with the mental health case managers because things were tracking as they had been when I initially talked to them. And then by the end of engagement, her mental health had improved so much that I had all the information that I needed at that time, and she was doing so well. She didn't have any symptoms anymore. So collaboration decreased because we were all tracking really stably for many, many months.
But you still stayed in touch in terms of care team and things like
Definitely. We still stayed in touch. I used to be on the phone to them maybe once or twice a week. It became once a month.
Yeah, wonderful. Great. Thank you everyone for those questions, and thank you very much for your presentation. And I love the work around the kind of common goals that you've created with the practitioners and the sense of learning together. And, you know, just your description of kind of setting up the working relationship and how you kind of work together. I was thinking particularly that idea of kind of that handing back parenting, you know, like, because I think mental health there's no natural way, like people do take it over when people are not well, but there's no natural kind of way. How do you give it back? And I think, you know, even in your timeline, creating that sense of, going with kind of recovery and where things are at. And so, you know, how that everyone's working together to hand back some of that parenting. It was a really lovely example of doing that. So thank you both for that presentation, and thank you everyone for your comments and questions.
Thank you.
All right. It's now time to go on to our second presentation. And this presentation is for FaPMI and AusChild, with the title of Sharing Expertise, Improving Outcomes in Out-of-Home Care. It's a collaborative project between the FaPMI program and AusChild. They're exploring what's helpful for team leaders, workers, carers, and children where a parent has a mental illness. There are two speakers, and I'll just introduce those to you. The first of those is Alice Morgan, and she's a FaPMI coordinator at the Alfred Mental Health and Addiction Health Service. Alice is an educator and family therapist with considerable experience working with children and families in schools, public health, and community organisations. She has also worked as a counsellor with women and children who have experienced family violence in community development and management roles. Alice is author of What is Narrative Therapy? An Easy Read Introduction, 2000, and Narrative Therapy with Children and Their Families, 2006. They are both kind of Dulwich Centre publications. And yeah, it is of note that her books have been translated into 15 different languages. The second speaker is Natalie Paps. She's also a FaPMI coordinator, and she's at Monash Health. Natalie is a qualified occupational therapist and family therapist, and is currently enrolled in a graduate certificate in clinical education. She has extensive experience working in mental health in both clinical and non-clinical roles, and she has been accredited foster carer for 4.5 years. I also wanted to introduce Sally Guru, who's currently the Team Leader Carer Support Assessment and Intake at AusChild Foster Care Program in the Southern region. Sally has worked within the out-of-home care field for the past 18 years in a number of different roles, including the support and delivery of case management, intake, carer recruitment, and carer support, as well as therapy roles for children in care. As with the previous presentation, we'll do a question and answer session at the end of this time, and I'll hand it over to you all.
Thank you, Hannah, and also to Deb for your acknowledgement of country and introductions. We're on Wurundjeri land today, and I'm Alice from Alfred Health, as Hannah introduced us, and Natalie and Sally will be speaking as well, but I was just wanted to get started by introducing the role of a FaPMI coordinator. For those that might not be familiar with our role, is really to increase the capacity for services, both public mental health services and also family and community services, to better support families where a parent has mental illness. So we work within our organisations as well as collaborating with other services to help support the needs of these families. Sally, would you like to explain Ozchild?
Sure, thanks, Alice. So I'm Sally and I'm from Ozchild, based in the southern region in our foster care program. We are a not-for-profit organisation that provides support for children and young people living in foster care and kinship care. We currently support 295 kinship households and 220 foster care households. And we also provide evidence-based programs that have the aim of strengthening relationships for families. And we've recently celebrated our 170th year of service.
Thanks, Sally. And Nat, would you like to explain where you're coming from?
Hi everyone, my name's Natalie. I'm the FaPMI coordinator at Monash Health.
Terrific.
So just to give a little bit of background, I guess, as to why these work and collaborations are so important, is that in Victoria, there's around 10,300 children and young people living in either foster care or kinship care at any one time. So of these, around 2,000 are aged between newborn and 5 years old. So more broadly in the community, so not just children in out-of-home care, we know that 21 to 23% of Australian children under the age of 18 years have at least one parent with a mental illness.
So we wanted to begin just trying to think back for the history of this collaboration and where it all started. And it actually started with an individual case that I was asked to give some secondary consultation around with one of our case managers in our mental health service. So it started with an individual case and it turned into a much broader collaboration between the organisations. So the focus of our presentation today is really on that organisational collaboration, but just to start by explaining that it really came from that individual case. And the case study you've heard this morning, I guess, was resonating very strongly with me in terms of the way we went about supporting one of the parents in our service to continue to have contact visits with their child who was in a foster care home and was guided by Ozchild. So the case first came to me for consultation because it was reported that the contact visits were really going, well, they were a bit of a disaster. And everybody was finding them difficult. People were turning up late. There was the activities that were happening at the contact visits that weren't satisfying to anybody involved, the child, the parent, the case manager that was there. And so it kind of began this big collaboration with all the people that were supporting the members of the family. And Family Life had just shown you that lovely diagram of all the different services. Well, we could do a similar one. So through this case, we started collaborating and having meetings with all the key players so that we could establish, I guess, some common areas of support for their parents with mental illness, for the case managers based at Ozchild, and for the foster care family, and then, of course, all importantly, for the child that was involved. So it involved coordinating with all those services that you can see on the screen, including NDIS, so that their support coordination was changed, their goals, so that NDIS could be brought on board to support contact visits. Also through the process, there were legal proceedings going on. And so again, we collaborated with Child Protection and the parents' lawyers so that everyone remained on the same page in terms of understanding the limits and the capacity also of the parent, the impact of their illness on the situation, and also what might be possible in terms of support for the relationship within the context of the safety and well-being of the child. So, as I said, we're going to now move on really to speak much more about the components of the collaboration that this then opened up with AusChild as a result.
So considering the very specific case that Alice spoke about, I happen to be the team leader across the case manager at the time, which is how I met Alice and then met Natalie, and our collaboration kind of grew from there. So we really wanted to focus today on the ways that FaPMI and AusChild have built the collaboration relationship, and some of the ways that we've worked together to improve outcomes for children in foster care and kinship care. So obviously we began by getting to know each other and what our services do, and then we moved toward staff training, looking at foster and kinship carer support, identifying any other support needs within the out-of-home care sector, and filling a gap, which is a very special story book for children. And now we're looking forward to the future in terms of what our collaboration means.
So we're just going to speak a little bit about those components that that have made up this collaboration. So the first component was that sort of getting to know each other, and I guess that was really important in developing a shared understanding about our different organisations, our roles, what the scope of our practice was, for instance, what FaPMI coordinators could and couldn't do, what AusChild case managers, where their roles aligned and where they were different from our case managers, and spent time really thinking about what particular areas of expertise we had, what our strengths were, and what resources we each had that we could bring to this collaboration. So that might be financial resources, but was also practical resources, like FaPMI, for instance, has a wealth of books for children. We have a wealth of information about how to explain mental illness to children. And AusChild provided a lot of their physical resources. They have a very strong social media presence, for instance. So we canvassed all the resources that we might be able to share, and also talked a lot about what our hopes might be for working together and what opportunities there might be, and I guess be really open to those opportunities, and keep them kind of at the centre of this work.
So having a think about what the collaboration looked like in action. So we started off by providing staff training. So we provided training to the foster care case managers to start with, and then we were invited to provide the same training to the kinship care case management team as well. So some of the topics that were included were the impact of parental mental health challenges on children, the impact of parental mental health challenges on parenting, what helps parents, what helps children, and also we discussed the child information sharing scheme. So thinking about some of the legislation and the MARAM framework that actually supports staff to actually be able to share information between services when it comes to child safety and wellbeing. We also provided, as Alice just said, information around the different supports that are available, and also the resources that FaPMI have to offer. And then we also do provide secondary consultation to services across the state. So it's not just our mental health services, but to anybody who would like some support around working with a family where there's a parent with a mental health challenge. So what we did together is that the FaPMI coordinators, Alice and I, developed the training package and the content, and then we shared that with the AusChild staff, and then they would review and tweak that to make sure that it was meeting the needs of their staff. Alice and I delivered the training and provided the resources, and then AusChild were able to obviously make the time and the space to get their staff all together, provide the space for us to do the training, and also provided us with some evaluation and feedback as well about how the training went. So I think Sally's just going to touch on the impact of that, I guess, on the staff at AusChild.
Yeah, sure. So I think for us, this experience of the training allowed staff to think more broadly about the impacts of mental health challenges for parents that have children in foster care or kinship placements, and to think about some practical ways to support them in having really positive contact with their children, and in turn kind of creating an opportunity for children to have more positive experiences of birth family and better outcomes for those relationships in the long term. So at times in the out-of-home care sector, I think we can think about contact from the child's perspective and the impact of parental mental illness challenges on children. And this training really opened an opportunity for us to consider the challenges from the parent's perspective and think about the ways that we can help parents to succeed with contact, which in turn creates better outcomes for children.
So following on from the staff training, Ozchild then invited Alice and I to provide some training to their foster carers and their kinship carers. So we provided 2 one-hour training sessions to foster carers online. So that was done after hours at one of their regular catch-up sessions. And the topics included, again, the impact of parental mental illness on children, what helps children, the importance of and how to talk to children about parental mental health challenges, and then also to provide them with the support and some guidance around that, as well as the resources and tools that help have these really, really important conversations. And then I went out and visited a couple of kinship care support groups and met with some online. And again, a very similar, it was more of a conversational interaction rather than a formal training, but a lot of questions and answers, again, providing resources and supporting and encouraging them to talk to children about parental mental illness. So again, what it looked like as far as the collaboration, how we worked together was that the FaPMI coordinators, we developed the content and Ozchild reviewed the content and tweaked it. We delivered the training and provided the resources, and Ozchild were able to promote these sessions to their carers through their social media. And they also arranged for carers to attend, and then they also, the staff attended the sessions in order to, I guess, support the carers, but also support any questions that they may have. That is a bit of a crossover, I guess, between what a FaPMI coordinator might be able to answer, but also what might be more pertinent to their role as a carer, so something that Ozchild is in a better position to answer. So again, working together in order to make sure that the carers walked away with the most helpful information for themselves. And again, they facilitate the evaluation and feedback for us. And I think Sally's going to speak again from the perspective of Ozchild and the carers.
Yeah, so what we felt was the training really helped carers to consider the experience of birth family mental illness challenges and created a real space for them to empathise around those challenges. And the main takeaways for carers was to begin to think about how they could support the children in their care to manage birth family contact, manage any disappointments really respectfully, and to help children talk about parental mental illness in an age-appropriate manner. And it really opened the conversation to the importance of carers' roles in supporting children with their parental contact.
Thanks, Sally and Nat. So we've been through the first couple of parts of this collaboration in terms of getting to know each other, and then the sessions we did with staff at Ozchild, and also then the support we provided to kinship carer and foster carers. And along the way, I guess we kept our conversations going and started to identify some gaps in information and resources, particularly for children in this situation. And one of the things that became apparent pretty soon was that many of the books that we had, FaPMI books we had that explained parental mental illness to children, the context of those books was that the children were in the care of their parent, birth parent, or would be returning to the care of their parents. And so for many of these children, we understand that it can be very unclear. And so we couldn't use those books in this context. So in one of our meetings, I think Natalie and I just said, why don't we do a book? Why don't we try and fill this gap. Let's see what Ozchild thinks. So again, in the spirit of the collaboration and this sort of thirst for keeping open with opportunities, Ozchild said, yeah, let's do it. So this part of the collaboration has been really work that we've been doing probably for the last 8 to 10 months. And it's been a really exciting and fantastic thing to work together on. So first of all, of course, we had to kind of scope the project, what would be involved. And the 3 services worked together to develop some focus groups. So Ozchild, we did some focus groups with Ozchild staff, with their foster and kinship carers, and also with young people with lived experience. Then a big part of the collaboration, of course, was negotiating sort of some legal agreements and some of the outline some of the way that we would be distributing and disseminating the book, intellectual property, all those tricky things, and copyright, all had to be negotiated and signed off at levels of our organisation. So it was lots of toing and froing over that. Then finding some funding. So again, we had to come to the party and say, well, how can we get some money to pay an author and to get a proper illustrator to bring our vision to life? And so again, the 3 services collaborated about what funding they might be able to put towards this. Along this process, we were engaged with our author, Linda Espy, and the illustrator, Gwyneth Jones. And so that meant we needed to work with Ozchild and the kinship carers, the staff as well, around different drafts of the book. We really needed their expertise around looking at the language that we were using in these books and also the pictures, so that we were sure that the book was going to be useful to their sector. So Nat and I had, of course, some ideas and experience around how to explain mental illness to children, and Ozchild's expertise in that current local, being able to speak directly with foster and kinship carers and Ozchild staff was so important to this. We also consulted with Ozchild's Indigenous worker and some of their other expert roles within that service around the drafts to ensure that we were making sure that we were thinking about diversity and inclusion and some of those other considerations. So we're planning a book launch today. After this presentation, you'll have an opportunity to see the book yourself. You're the first audience to it. And at the end of reading the story to you today, we'll give you some information about promotion and distribution. So we're still in conversations and still collaborating together about those things, about the book launch and the promotion and distribution between FaPMI and Ozchild. So some of that is still to come. So that's been another, I guess, really big part of this collaboration.
So having a think about some of our future directions and I guess more hopes that we have is that there will be ongoing relationship with Ozchild staff and carers to be able to provide training as needed. So whether or not there's staff turnover or new carers come on board, that we are able to provide this information to them as well. And also training will be offered to other foster care and kinship care agencies. So any of you out there, feel free to hit us up. And we can come and see you as well. In their future training as well, we would like to be able to offer training, particularly around the use of the storybook that's been written, just because it is a tool in having conversations. So there's, we'd like to be able to have a conversation about how that might be used. We're also looking for ongoing consultation between Ozchild and area mental health services. So we've already seen, since we've started this collaboration, I've seen myself in my service that there has actually been an increased connection between case managers and Ozchild staff when thinking around contact with children, how the parents' mental health is going at that time, and just I guess being open with each other around where things are at. And then we're also going to be looking at the dissemination of the storybook to foster care and kinship care agencies. So we envision that the book probably will sit more likely in the services to be able to use and share as they feel is most helpful.
So part of that might also be Natalie and I kind of linking local agencies with your local FaPMI coordinator. So there's lots of really exciting opportunities to come, I think.
So this is our final slide, and I guess what we've done is listed some agreed ingredients for success in the collaboration for FaPMI and Auschild. And for me, what's really struck me and feels important is the common ethos between FaPMI and Auschild in the thinking around the importance of carers as the main agents of change for children. And, you know, having staff trained in supporting carers to do the really important work with children. For example, you know, this book in terms of carers reading it to children, staff being able to, you know, support carers to do that very useful and therapeutic work for children.
For me, I suppose I could share that in what Family Life said in terms of being very appreciative of the curious and openness to new ideas that has kind of driven this collaboration, and being open to sort of different approaches and different ideas, and really Auschild's strong commitment throughout. And it's been a really tricky time, we know, with the pandemic and with working offsite, all those sorts of things. And Auschild have always replied to emails, have always turned up to meetings, they've kept their the commitments to all the actions that they said they get done. And so I think that's you know, been just made such a difference to us being able to achieve what we've achieved. What about for you, Nat?
I think from my perspective, it's just been fantastic to work with an organisation who's been so open to the work that FaPMI do and the things that we can learn from each other. And also just, I guess, that shared value of the importance of relationship and how valuable relationship is. So that's just even in observing how Auschild work, in that they value the relationship between carers as well, to be able to support each other by having all of these sessions for carers to attend, and kinship care groups where they meet up, as well as also that valued relationship between carers and children and their birth parents, between services, between staff. So I think that's been something that I've really enjoyed as part of this process. That actually concludes the formal part of our presentation, but I guess we invite any questions that anyone may have.
Well, I'm actually wondering, in the scheme of time, whether actually we're to finish at 12:30, whether we might actually move the questions to after, because I think it would be really important to have a bit of a look at this book that you put together. And so I'm wondering, Alice, is it okay, and to thank you, Natalie, Sally and Alice, for that presentation, and to go to a kind of what we had as our third presentation, our launch of One of a Kind, Darcy and Oliver discovering their way.
Absolutely, why not? So I will just share my screen again.
So we're going to have a read through of the book, and Alice is going to read that for us in her lovely teacher voice. But we just before we start, I guess just a little bit of a background, you know, in regards to the story, and just, you know, to be some things that we're mindful of is that this is a storybook that is used as a tool. So it's a tool to start conversations. It's a tool that I guess gives children the message that whoever's reading the story to them is actually open to answering some more tricky questions and sitting with some conversations that people may find a little bit uncomfortable. And it's a tool to support both. It's not going to meet the needs of every single child, unfortunately, and it's not a story about a particular, you know, it's not going to match every single child's experience. But we have, I guess, tried to at least have it so that it can be interpreted, or the language can be changed, or the reader can, you know, modify language in it if they choose to, because, you know, everybody has different preferences around language. The two characters in the book, one is a child living in foster care and the other child is living in kinship care. So we do acknowledge that some children move around a lot, some children move between foster care and kinship care, some and residential care. But I guess it's just yeah, I guess a reminder that it's a tool to use in regards to having these conversations. So at the beginning of the book, we actually are providing a guide to the adult reader for them to have a look through to start with. Did you want me to read that out?
I think just in terms of time, Nat, you've probably given a bit of a summary of the intention of the book. So it's probably, yeah.
There's just a little bit of some little examples in there as well around how they might answer questions, you know, around using the example of the brain being a puzzle, and sometimes the puzzle pieces get a bit mixed up. So depending on what language, so we do have that spiel at the beginning of the book as well to help guide the reader in using the book.
So without further ado, you can sit back and relax, enjoy this story. And perhaps while you're listening, you think about how it might be helpful to the context that you're working in, or that others might be. So this story is called One of a Kind, Darcy and Oliver Discovering Their Way. It's written by Linda Espy and illustrated by Gwyneth Jones. They're both Australian, live in Australia. So these are the double page spreads of the book. So that's what's known, that's just the nice colourful image you see when you first open the book. Then we have the notes to adult readers that Nat was just alluding to, where we've got some suggestions for the ways that whoever the adult is that is using this story with children, just some ideas about how to get that conversation going and how to encourage language and children asking questions and having opportunities to talk about what's been happening. So they're the title pages of the book and all the copyright information. So Darcy Delaware is 7 years old. She enjoys playing with her friends and baking blueberry muffins on weekends. She loves to catch gigantic waves at the beach. Oliver Featherstone is 11 years old. He spends time dreaming of what he will do when he grows up. Some days, Oliver thinks he might be a zookeeper, or a gardener, or maybe a nurse. What would you like to do when you grow up? What do you enjoy doing? Families come in all shapes and sizes. Some children don't live with their parents. They live with other family members, like grandparents, aunties, and uncles. Some live in with a foster carer and their family. Some move around between families. There are many reasons why children don't live with their parents. It may be because their parents are unwell, unable to look after them when they are unwell. It may be because their parents are getting help for themselves and other adults are looking after them. All families are one of a kind. All children are one of a kind, just like Darcy, Oliver, and you. Darcy's mum is unwell and can no longer look after her, so she lives with her grandma Dell. Sometimes Darcy feels okay about living away from her mum because there were some topsy-turvy times. Sometimes she feels sad, muddled, and on occasion angry. She shouts and pouts and frowns. She moans and groans and wants to throw stones until she's exhausted. Even though Darcy understands her mum is not able to visit, sometimes she asks questions like, who's looking after my mum? Am I going to catch it? Why am I the only one not living with my mum? When Grandma Dell reassures her, Darcy is happy. She remembers she has people who love and care about her. Darcy is one of a kind, just like you. When you have questions, who can you turn to? Who can you go to? It's okay to have questions. So is having lots of thoughts and feelings. Oliver lives with a foster carer called Jack and his family. Oliver joins in family life each and every day. They have a dog they like to take to the park. Oliver doesn't know when he'll see his dad again because his dad's brain and thinking gets mixed up from time to time. Last time they saw each other, it was a bit of a disaster, and Oliver felt scared. Just like Darcy, the ups and downs in Oliver's feelings can leave him in a slippery dippery, wiggly wobbly, flimsy whimsy, rickety rockety mood. When Jack notices, he suggests they take a walk with the dog. They chat together about the day and the things on Oliver's mind. Oliver sometimes shares stories about the time when he lived with his dad and brothers and sisters. One Sunday morning, Darcy said to Grandma Dell, "It's all my fault I can't live with my mum. Did my grumpy moods make her get sick?" Grandma Dell gave Darcy a big bear hug and said, "Darcy, it's nobody's fault. There are lots of different reasons why someone might become unwell." Darcy has not seen her mum since she was little. Her mum made some mistakes, but now she's working hard to make things better. What questions would you like to ask? One day at school, a classmate asked Oliver, "Why don't you live at home with your parents?" Oliver felt embarrassed. His face went hot and bright red. He stood tall, he stood strong, and he replied, "Don't you know that other adults can care for you too, not just parents?" One of his friends is saying, "I don't care who he lives with. Oliver is kind and a great friend. That's what's important." Like Oliver, we all need to feel safe. It's okay to speak up. It's your choice. By talking to people they trust and asking questions, Darcy and Oliver have discovered that when parents become unwell, they might do things that children wish they didn't. And it can take some time to get well again. Darcy and Oliver have discovered they are loved and cared for. They've also discovered all families are one of a kind. All children are one of a kind, just like Darcy, Oliver, and you. So over to you, Hannah.
There we go, unmute. Thank you so much for reading that to us. It was great to have that. I'm just wondering, just quickly in terms of time before we do our sum up, Rachel had a really great question about how to contribute to support children who have limited information about their parents' history. I don't know whether you've got a sort of brief comment on that before we kind of go to a bit of a sum up.
Who wants to speak to that? Hannah, Nat or Sally, or I can. So it's when we're not sure what the circumstances of the parents. Yeah. Sally, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that's a really complex issue that we're often faced with. And I guess it kind of speaks to the theme of this is all around collaboration and trying to gain as much information from, the people that are known to the family as possible. I suppose that's something that we would do in working with children in foster care, where often we have limited information. And often it's not something that happens quickly. It's a narrative that kind of pieces together over a significant period of time. So, and obviously we're not the holders of that information. We need to go and seek that from a range of different services and, family members and that sort of thing. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah,
and certainly
I think, oh, sorry. I think like one of the challenges that I've noticed is for us who come in from support, from the angle of support, because it's like we have organizations that have already been put on the care plan of these young people, and then we're the ones who stay with these young people, but we're told nothing about them. So all the information is perhaps regarded confidential, and then we come in to spend the day, with these young people, maybe put on rosters 8 hours a day or 24 hours with these young people, but we know nothing about them. And then, so we are told, no, we can't tell you much about them, just spend the day with them. But so it feels as if like all of the collaborative effort is being done perhaps at organizational level, but when it comes to people who spend day-to-day tasks and day-to-day experiences with these young people and experience their outbursts, experience their crying, their depression, we are not told anything. So we don't know what causes it, or, how to support them, because we don't have any information.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example, Rachel, of how, sharing information and finding and trying to work together with the services that are involved actually supports the young person, in the case, the example you're using, but also, but children of any age. And the case that started all this collaboration that I alluded to, we definitely did, that was part of this work. So to begin with, Ozchild weren't aware of the parents, what the diagnosis was, for instance, and I don't think their child was aware of that either. And so through our conversations, we worked with the father to explain to him how we know that really is helpful for children if they know, and that there are ways of explaining that to children that children can understand. And often, sometimes that silence and secrecy is brought on by this misunderstanding that either children wouldn't know or understand, or that it's you can't talk to children about these things. So I think that's a role we can all play in helping the sector understand that we do know that children find it helpful to have information that's age appropriate, and that rather than them making up their own ideas about why they're living in the situation that they're living. So yeah, there's still lots of work to be done in the sector, but I think now that the Child Information Sharing Scheme has opened up as well, that's given us more possibilities and avenues for sharing information that's centred around the wellbeing of the child or young person.
Great. Thank you for that, Alice. Thank you for the question, Rachel. I'm going to very quickly hand over to Carol Clark, who is a FaPMI coordinator at Northern Mental Health Service, to do a very quick summary of today before we finish at past:30. Thanks, Carol.
I just really like to take the opportunity to thank all of you who've presented today for the amazing work that you're doing. Now, I know it's been amazing, and I also know that in conversations with you, you have sometimes minimised that. You have sometimes thought, well, this is just what we do. I would like to say this is really outstanding work and provides great models for us to build on. You've done lovely work in identifying barriers and opportunities that clearly exist when we can be open to the possibilities and recognise the importance of creating those relationships between services, but with families and with children as well, that benefits us all. I would like to just acknowledge also that there are probably many people who are watching today or might watch at a later stage who are also doing really interesting work in that collaborative practice space. And we would particularly like you to think about joining with us as part of the cross-sector working group with the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare and FaPMI, to build on the work to help us all move forward and to take up the sort of opportunities that present themselves. I'm not sure what else I want to say. I mean, there's lots of things I would love to say, but we're getting close to being out of time. But these themes around collaborative practice and how we work together is a consistent one that comes up all the time in the conversations that we have within the working party. And the work you've done today is really, or shown us what you've done today, really helps to tease out the layers and levels of that. And I just think it's extraordinary, and I would like to congratulate you all. And that's it from me. Oh no, I've got one last thought. Sorry. I tend to do this, sorry. And that is one of the things that we want to do, as Nat and Alice have particularly mentioned, is the idea of actually developing or finding ways of sharing this in every region. So we have FaPMI coordinators around the state in every adult mental health services. We have child and family services all over the state in various configurations. So looking for ways of bringing people together is one of the things that we would like to do. So one of the things that is being mooted, if you like, is setting up some communities of practice at a local level. And we will send you some more information somehow or other to let you know about that and what might be possible to progress this work. So
thank you, Carol, for that. The final words, and just really special thanks to Carol and Sri for the work putting this together. I know there's been a lot of work behind the scenes around this forum, and really I just want to thank again Vanessa and Julie for their presentation, and Nat, Sally and Alice for their presentations as well, and for both the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare to work with us as the FaPMI program to put this on today. I want to thank everyone who's kind of been involved, and hopefully that everyone's had some inspiration, and I'm looking forward to kind of working with everyone and potentially maybe seeing people at our network meeting. So thank you all.